The ark, the rushing waters, the dove, the olive branch, the rainbow, all of these images in this week's Torah portion, some of the most powerful in our culture. We see them everywhere. How many of us, when thinking of a tsunami or the devastating hurricanes that we're witnessing, are reminded of Noah and the flood? How many institutions committed to dialogue and peace use olive branches and doves as their symbols? And we need only look at the beautiful tapestry behind me to be reminded of the power of the glorious rainbow of our Torah. This story has captured our imagination and is one of the most memorable, probably, from most of our childhoods, no matter what religion we may have grown up in. And given how vivid this narrative is, it is understandable that we might spend most of our lives focusing on the surface and miss the chance to explore how very deep these waters run. The flood waters in this story of Noah are powerful images, and the havoc that they wreak is hard to understand. Our sages can and do interpret them and their meaning in many ways and varied ways. They are cast as a tool of punishment, ridding the world of a generation that was so careless and so cruel. They can be understood as a giant mikvah, a mechanism of purification, cleansing a world and preparing for a new start. They are most certainly, to many, an expression of God's unfairness, wiping away the innocent along with the guilty, absent any apparent compassion or forgiveness. They are also, for many, an expression of God's faith in creation, the capacity of a single family and a small group of animals to rebuild an entire world. They appear as evidence for some that God can lose control of God's own anger and lash out indiscriminately, and they attest for others to God as a fair and bold judge of humanity who can, when necessary, act with decisiveness and clarity. Our Midrashic tradition is rich with the rabbis' musings and imaginings about what kind of morality the story of Noah and the flood is trying to impress upon us as its readers. It's almost a story that could be left out of the Torah with no real loss to our story. What can we learn from Noah's story of the floodwaters that swallow up his entire world right before his eyes? Why do we need to remember him and his story? By many criteria, Noah is not an inspiring role model for us. Unlike Abraham, who comes later, Noah offers no protest to God's decree to wipe out an entire community, an entire world for their sins. We don't hear from Noah one word of counter-argument that perhaps his neighbors aren't all bad. What about their children? That perhaps God doesn't mean to rid the world of all animals and just save 2 of every species, or perhaps everyone deserves a second chance? No words escape Noah's lips. He does as God commands. Noah's neighbors, the people of his generation, are cast by the Torah and the Midrash as cruel and inhumane people, their primary sin being objectification of others for their own gratification. So it seems that when God offers Noah a life raft, Noah is much like his neighbors in that he does not worry one bit about their fate and only cares for himself. And yet, God recognizes something in Noah, recognizes a potential in him to be more than what he is. So God gives him a chance to change, and that chance is the ark. On the one hand, the ark is literally a lifeboat. It is a godsend, sparing Noah from the disastrous fate of his generation. On the other hand, the ark is so small and isolated. It's a space in which Noah is alone with his family and a few simple tasks. A midrash on this story places in Noah's mouth the words of King David from Psalm 142, "Free my soul from prison," the midrash imagines Noah saying. Noah, the Midrash tells, feels somewhat imprisoned by the ark after a while rather than freed. And yet we know, and he must know on some level, that this confining, this deprivation, this denial of constant human interaction and self-gratification is his gateway to a new world and a new way of existence. As I study the Parsha this week, I cannot help but hear the echoes of much of what plagues us in our world, like the world that Noah lives in. Doesn't it feel sometimes like we are surrounded by selfishness and greed, by materialism and objectification, by cruelty and inhumanity coming at us from all sides? Doesn't it sometimes feel like a tidal wave is washing over us, that we are drowning in our own worst instincts and impulses? Whether it's the constant barrage of clickbait or mean-spirited Facebook banter or a sense of distrust that seems to plague our community and nation and world, doesn't a lifeboat that would carry us away from it all sound like a welcome mode of existence? And then we must ask, why was the ark transformative for Noah? And one answer might be that while on the ark, Noah's world was only relationship with the people he loved the most and caring for the vulnerable beings who depended upon him, namely the animals he was charged with feeding. Torah scholar Aviva Zornberg poignantly suggests the ark is to be a laboratory of kindness, a laboratory of kindness. And it is in this laboratory of kindness that Noah reclaims what is good in his soul and is transformed into a different kind of human being. The great Torah scholar Rashi comments that when Noah finally sends the dove out of the window, he makes no demand of her. Unlike the world he left, in which every person and animal was treated like an object and a source for personal satisfaction, this dove is freed from Noah's grasp with no expectation, no requirement, no oppression, no intrusion. She simply is given the opportunity to live her life. And Noah learns from the way that she lives her life, namely that she returns with that olive branch in her mouth, that the world is ready for him too. Through his time in the small and tangible world of the ark, through his time dwelling on what is real and true in his life, he is softer and a gentler version of himself. And it is only then that God invites him to exit. If we think of the ark that way, as a prison that in some way confines Noah to fewer and more tangible activities than he would customarily do, and as a retreat from the harshness of the world so that he can relearn the transcendence of relationship and generosity, then we needn't wait for a massive and destructive floodwater to overtake us so that we can learn the same lessons. We can construct our own confined spaces that pull us out of the throes of a generation gone mad. We can decide to spend less time in toxic online spaces or in combative conversations where we don't listen to the person standing right in front of us. We can build our own laboratories of kindness that will reshape our expectations and sharpen our senses so that we can be part of staving off the waters that threaten to drown all that is good in the life that we share together. Perhaps Shabbat is also a laboratory of kindness, an impermanent retreat from the world that is so very harsh into a world of family, of friends, of learning, of fulfilling, and of praying. It is important to remember also that Noah re-enters a world that is not perfect. As Rabbi Greenstein said, there is evil and unkindness in this world too, and it even befalls Noah. But the rainbow that God sets in the sky is a reminder that God has faith in our human capacity to grow and change. We are a work in progress, and God loves that about us, the rainbow declares. May this Shabbat serve as a reminder that the harshness of the world we live in is not inevitable. We can choose how we are in it. And if it takes a retreat of our own building in order to remember how we want to be when we leave, so be it. Noah reminds us that we have the capacity to reshape our lives, even in the most difficult of circumstances. May we all feel the strength we need in order to do that. Shabbat shalom.